Hey Apollo riders, if you live in Australia and are looking to get an electric scooter, specifically an Apollo electric scooter, we've compiled the most important regulations on scooter riding for you. Remember to subscribe to get more useful tips and updates from us. So, are electric scooters legal in Australia? The short answer, it depends on where you are. The laws change from state to state and even city to city. So today, I'm breaking down everything you need to know, where you can legally ride, the speed limit, the safety gear we recommend, and the key restrictions in Australia's biggest cities. So let's dive in. First things first, electric scooters are classified as personal mobility devices in Australia, but each state has its own rules. Some states allow them on the road, some only on the footpaths, and others still have trial programs in place. The most important thing to look for are A, speed limits. Typically 10 to 25 kilometers an hour depending on the area. Number 2, road use. Some states allow scooters on local roads, others don't. 3, helmet requirements. In most states, helmets are mandatory. 4, private versus rental scooters. Some states allow rental e-scooters, but some ban privately owned ones on public roads. Now, let's break it down by state and city. The first one being Queensland, so Brisbane and the Gold Coast. If you live in Queensland, you're lucky since it's one of the most e-scooter friendly states. So here's what you need to know. Electric scooters are legal for public use on footpaths, shared paths, and on roads that have a speed limit of less than 60 kilometers an hour. The speed limits are 12 kilometers an hour on footpaths and 25 kilometers an hour on bike lanes and roads. Number 2, you must be 16 years and older to ride an electric scooter in Queensland. Number 3, mandatory helmet use. Number 4, using your phone while riding or carrying other passengers is prohibited, and we really don't recommend this on our scooters. The next is all e-scooters must have a warning bell and lights for nighttime riding. Note, all the Polo scooters already have these, so you're set. The second state is New South Wales, so Sydney. New South Wales has some of the strictest e-scooter laws, but don't lose hope, because things are changing quickly. Rental e-scooters are allowed in trial areas only, such as Western Sydney. Privately owned e-scooters are unfortunately illegal on public roads and paths, but they can be used on private property. Speed limits, 10 kilometers an hour on shared paths and 20 kilometers an hour on roads. Mandatory helmet use. Also, no riding on footpaths, super important. No phone use and no passengers, as we always recommend as well. There's pressure to legalize private e-scooters, so stay tuned for updates. For updated information, we recommend you visit the Transport for NSW website, and you can find a link in the description below. Now the next state is Victoria, Melbourne. Good news! Victoria's shared e-scooter trial has concluded, and e-scooters are now legal in Victoria, but not without rules to follow. Starting with, you must ride on shared use paths or roads with a max speed of 60 kilometers an hour. Next up, speed limits, 20 kilometers an hour maximum. The next is mandatory helmet use. Also, you must be at least 16 years old to legally ride a scooter. Similar to other states, no phone use, no passengers, and a BAC limit of 0.05, so no drinking and driving. Now be sure to check the links below. There's fines for wrongful e-scooter use, so please make sure to check your local regulation before riding on your e-scooter. Important to note that Victoria's trials are ongoing, and permanent laws are expected soon, so keep checking the Transport for Victoria websites. Now the last state is Western Australia, Perth. WA has progressive e-scooter laws. The first, starting that privately owned e-scooters are legal. Amazing. Speed limit of 10 kilometers an hour on footpaths and then 25 kilometers an hour on roads and shared paths. The next requirement is that helmets are always required at all times. Also, scooters are allowed on footpaths, bike lanes and low-speed roads with a maximum speed limit of 50 kilometers an hour or less. Similar to other states, no passengers, no phone use, and BAC limit of 0.05. For more information, please visit the Government of Western Australia's website. And now moving on to Southern Australia, Adelaide. South Australia began several trials in different cities in 2023 under strict regulation. The good news? This year we anticipate new regulation, hopefully in favor of scooters, especially privately owned ones. Important to note, until then, these are still in place today. Only rental e-scooters are allowed in trial areas. Privately owned scooters are banned in public. The speed limit is currently 15 kilometers an hour. As always, helmets are also required. Also to note, no riding on roads, bike lanes, or bus lanes. Now, not to forget our lovely Tasmania, ACT, and Northern Territories. Tasmania and the ACT are fairly relaxed about e-scooters, while Northern Territories have limited public use. For Tasmania, for example, private scooters are legal with a maximum of 25 km per hour and a helmet required. For ACT, such as Canberra, private scooters are legal with a 15 km an hour on footpaths and 25 km an hour elsewhere, as well with helmets required. Within the Northern Territory, only rental scooters are legal in trial areas, and private use is banned in public. So, are electric scooters legal in Australia? Answer is, it depends. Some states are all in, others are still testing the waters. If you're thinking about getting an e-scooter, please make sure to check your state and local regulation before hitting the road. And now we have to disclose the penalties for breaking the law. So what happens if you break the rules? Well, depending on where you are, fines can get pretty steep. In New South Wales, for example, riding a privately owned e-scooter in public can cost you up to $698 in fines. And if you're caught speeding, riding without a helmet, or using your phone, you can face additional fines. In Queensland, fines are a little lower, but still not cheap. Riding without a helmet, that'll cost you $130. Speeding, another $130. And if you get caught using your phone while riding, you're looking at a $1,078 fine, which is the same as using a phone while driving your car. Now, each state has its own rules, but the takeaway is clear. If you're riding an e-scooter, know the laws in your area, or be ready to pay up. Now, as always, even during the filming of this video, please always check your state's transportation website for the latest regulations, fines, and penalties. You'll see the links at the bottom of this video, and please keep checking them over time before riding on the roads. Now, let's move to the future of e-scooter laws in Australia. So, what's next? Are these rules really going to change? The good news is that more states are considering legalizing private e-scooters. In New South Wales, a new regulatory framework is currently being developed, with trials running in places like Western Sydney. If these go well, private e-scooters could be legalized across the state. In Victoria, for example, the government is currently reviewing the results of their e-scooter trials. The expectation is that they'll follow a similar model to Queensland and legalize private e-scooters under strict regulation. And in Southern Australia, legislation is in the works to allow private e-scooters to be used on public roads, but they'll likely introduce similar rules on speed limits and where you can ride. Now, as the trials come to an end, the regulations will be implemented this year, so just please stay informed and check the websites as usual. Overall, Australia is slowly moving towards wider e-scooter legislation, but with a focus on safety and regulation. So if you're an e-scooter rider, keep an eye on updates, because the laws today might look very different to those in a year or 2 years down the road. And one last thing before you go, let's talk about safety. Every state that allows e-scooters requires riders to wear helmets. And honestly, we'd recommend it too, even if it wasn't mandatory. A study from the Australian Injury Prevention Unit found that 80% of serious e-scooter injuries involved head trauma, and most of these could have simply been prevented with the use of a helmet. And it's not just about helmets. There are other things that you can do to stay safe, like ensuring your scooter is visible at night by having a bright headlight, turning signals and stoplights, obeying speed limits, and being mindful of pedestrians and cars as you drive. Just because you can ride at 25 km an hour doesn't mean you should in crowded areas. At the end of the day, riding an e-scooter is about having fun and staying safe. Follow the rules, wear your helmets, and enjoy the ride. If you found this video useful, like and subscribe for more content like this. Let us know in the comments what you'd like to learn more about the Australian landscape and Apollo scooters in general.